Good afternoon, everybody. Christine Barconi here in the NBC4i Streaming Center, joined by NBC4 data journalist Ben Orner, talking about our new project that Ben is heading up called Climate Columbus, which is an NBC4 project where Ben and others are taking a look at the warming climate and changing weather here in Central Ohio. And as you do, Ben, you took a look at the numbers, you talked to some people, and are explaining what's going on as far as some pretty significant weather climate changes here in the Buckeye State.
Yes, if you go to our website and then under the weather tab, though, you'll see Climate Columbus. You can click on that and you can read about the project and a couple of stories that we've done so far. The biggest one right now is going to talk about heat waves. It's on the website right now. You know, when we think about climate change, we may think about these disastrous effects like wildfires, rising seas, stronger hurricanes, stuff like that. But here in the Great Lakes, you know, we're pretty immune to that kind of stuff, but we're not exempt from everything. And the biggest thing that we're going to see in this century is going to be rising heat waves, just extreme heat that we do not experience right now. And that's if carbon emissions continue on the pace they're at right now. So,
and Ben, let me know whenever you want me to toggle over to the maps. And I'll do that.
Yeah, you can. So she has the article right there. Dangerous summer heat in Columbus predicted to worsen as climate changes. There's this nationwide organization called the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they did this huge report in 2019 where they looked at cities across the United States, and they ran 3 models. One, like how many high heat index days they're going to have if carbon emissions continue on the pace they're at. And remember, global warming caused by more carbon emitted into the atmosphere. That's methane, carbon dioxide, stuff like that. And because these heat trapping gases exist in the atmosphere, we put them there that allows more heat, humidity to gather in the atmosphere, and it just makes things hotter in many parts of the world, and that includes Ohio. So the Union
I'm showing that the gigatons of carbon per year, and you've got like the no action, slow action, rapid action, and historical.
Right. So that no action is where we are now. You know, you hear headlines maybe like, oh, this state's making progress on this thing, this whatever. Like right now it's just so small potatoes that really we're on track for the red line. The yellow line is if we're able to make significant action by the middle of the century, so like 2040, 2050. And then rapid action is if like the federal government, the states, most of the rest of the world said right now, like we are going to make a huge turn and transition to renewable energy, stuff like that right now. That right now isn't realistic. That's not happening. But that would be, I guess, our best case scenario. But let's focus right now on the track we're at right now, and that's with no action. So that's by 2100, temperatures, the Earth warms 4.3 degrees Celsius.
Is this map right here, Ben? The pink one?
Yes.
Okay.
The Earth would warm 4.3 degrees Celsius. We've already warmed about 1.1 degrees since the Industrial Revolution. At 7.7 degrees Fahrenheit. So how that translates into like, all right, how hot is it going to be where I live? So if you can hover over a city.
So it's not just Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati that they're focusing on too. I'm looking at Mansfield and Lima, Newark. So some of our medium and smaller cities as well. Yeah,
I really liked how detailed they got with this data. And this is a huge report and very recent in 2019. And especially, having Newark, like that's great for folks out there.
Especially farmers who need to know this kind of thing, for their planting seasons as well. All right, pick a city and we'll hover over it and you can talk us through what we're seeing.
All right, so let's focus on Columbus. Okay. So Columbus right now, we see 19 days a year with a heat index above 90 degrees. And remember, heat index is heat and humidity. So like, it's pretty humid here compared to, out west or way up north. So it's that combination of the two that can make it feel really stifling. So that's what we talk about, the heat index. And we see 19 days a year with a heat index above 90, 1 day a year with a heat index above 100, and no days above 105. If we don't make significant progress on climate change by like 2050, we're going to go from 19 days to 65 days here above 90. 1 day to 24 days above 100 degrees, and then we'll have 11 days a year around 2050 where the heat index hits 105. And by the end of the century, this is about like 2070 to 2099, we'll have 97 days above 90 degrees, 52 days above 100 degrees, and 33 days above 105. So like think about that sort of month where it's like the worst of the summer, instead of it being like, oh
the
god,
entire summer.
like, oh gosh, the heat index is like, oh, I hit 95 today. I hate late July. I hate mid-August. Like that late July, mid-August, it's going to be an entire month where the heat index is over 105. And that's if, we are on our current emissions trajectory. This is not if like we regress. This is where we are right now.
Okay, and this is coming from the Union of Concerned Scientists. And can you, Ben, talk a little bit about who they are and what they do? Yeah,
they're some of the best climate scientists in the United States. They're based in Massachusetts, right outside of Harvard. I talked to one, Dr. Rachel Licker. She's based in Wisconsin and is a climate scientist with them. And basically her message was, this very detailed picture that they paint really lays bare what scientists have been saying for decades, especially in the 2000s, that like if we continue carbon emissions as they are, we're going to see a lot hotter temperatures. We're going to see worse wildfires that we're already seeing in the West. We're seeing heat waves in the Northwest, Seattle, Portland, where it's pretty cool, and they were hitting 110, 114. It's really stark, and what I love about this study is that it gets so local, and it really puts numbers on it that we can say like, oh, if we continue on this path, here's how hot it's going to be in Columbus. And another a meteorologist that I talked to with another organization said in the article, and I love this quote because I said like, all right, so what's it going to feel like? Give me an example. And he said, what's the climate of Central Ohio going to be 60, 70 years from now? He said, much more along the line of Central Louisiana, Central Mississippi, and Central Alabama. So by 2070, if we're on this same emissions path, Columbus could feel like the deep South in the middle of summer. And like today's climate would be just unrecognizable at that point. And it's hard for me. I've grown up in these northern Rust Belt areas most of my life, and I can't even fathom that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Ben. Just like anecdotally, I've heard people talk about, especially in the Cleveland area, talking about the growing regions that they're in, and that has changed over the past 100 years of when you put your crops in the ground, when you plow, etc. So we've definitely seen that over the past just recently over the past generation.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of effects of climate change, ones that like we've already seen and will continue to see, and then ones like if we keep on this trajectory, it's going to get worse and worse. Another thing I loved about this report is that, like we said earlier, they have 3 scenarios. That's the current scenario, but then like 2, if we get our act together, the slow action, what they call slow action, and then rapid action, and those are the yellow and green maps near the bottom of the article, and it has
scroll down to those.
Yeah, and it has the same cities, and you can sort of compare. So we see the yellow map there. If we hover over Columbus, if emissions start to decline in a big way by 2050, so maybe in the next 30, 40 years, we'll see 16 days above 100 degrees, and then 22 days above 100 degrees by the end of the century. It's like going from like 1 or 0 days above 100 to like 16, 22. Like that's still a huge step, but it's better than the worst case scenario. And if in a perfect world, the world just got its act together tomorrow, and we had a rapid action on carbon emissions, and that's the green map on this, on that slideshow. We hover over Columbus, we would prevent the worst effects. We go from 19 days a year with a heat index above 90 to by the end of the century, 16 days. Like we would kind of roll back
Yeah, kind of be at normal.
some of that, because carbon doesn't last in the atmosphere forever.
Yeah.
But it lasts for a very long time. But that's the best case scenario.
Now, Ben, whenever you were talking to these meteorologists and scientists for this article, there are people commenting saying, I like the heat, I like the humidity, I like this is good. But there are very serious repercussions for a dramatic climate change in, an area of the country. What are they?
Right. So I think it's a reflex you may have by hearing this is like deep south. That means deep south in the winter. I'd love to have a Louisiana winter. Well, sure, it may feel fine outside, but there are so many things that change the food systems, like the crops that we grow, like the agriculture that we have right now in Ohio. It can't just switch to a deep south like agriculture. We are anchored on corn and soybeans and stuff like that, and the same goes for our neighbors in Illinois and Indiana and Michigan. And it's just, it may feel nice, like, oh, what a great
apples. Think of our neighbors in Michigan. They need a certain kind of climate as well. See, Washington, and Michigan, they're not very hot places that you think of. But if the climate drastically changes, it's going to change, the crops that we can have and what we've gotten used to over the past centuries.
So it hurts farmers. But think about the summers. That's the thing. A summer where you have an entire month where it feels like 105 degrees outside. That's just, it's unfathomable. And, maybe if you're used to being inside in the summer, like great air conditioning, sure, you may not feel as affected as others, but there are folks here who don't have air conditioning. There are folks who work outside
every single day. Your mail carriers, your construction workers, linemen, everybody.
Yeah, we have this. Our power infrastructure can't just turn into like what South Texas has so quickly.
In South Texas, their power infrastructure isn't so hot right now either with what happened there.
Right, and there's another thing I was just reading about today is that we turn into the deep south, right? So then that means with stronger heat waves in the south compared to what we're going to see, and plus sea level rise, they're going to be
Caribbean.
Yeah, they're going to be people in Florida, Texas, Louisiana who their homes, they are literally flooded out of their homes or heated out of their homes, and they're going to be looking for a relatively cooler place to go.
You got to think about what our meteorologists talk about all the time.
Yeah.
They talk about the heating up outside, especially in the summertime, about how we don't want to see this rapid increase in heat, or you'll see what we saw last weekend with those crazy downpours and lightning, and we're still seeing that today. But I'm just thinking of last Thursday and Friday when we saw that because of how hot it was outside. So they're getting that every single day, but if this trend continues, maybe more so.
Yeah, the worst thing we can have is instability, and that's climate change makes things in our part of the world a lot warmer, but it also makes the climate more unstable and less predictable. And when I was talking to scientists, they were very clear. They said that what we need to do is we need to stop putting carbon in the atmosphere, because that's what's driving climate change.
And what's the biggest producer of carbon?
Well, it's how we generate our energy through like transportation. So the exhaust coming out of your car, the exhaust coming out of a city bus, and our electrical grid, which is mostly powered by non-renewable resources, petroleum, coal,
Just
natural
drive up
gas.
and down the Ohio River, and you'll see all those.
Yeah, stuff like that. And these are not changes that can happen overnight. People's jobs and their livelihoods are connected to these industries that contribute to climate change.
Oh, yeah.
It's very complicated, especially here in Ohio, having a diverse natural resource economy. But it is a singular problem that carbon going into the atmosphere and contributing to these problems. And there are things we can do, right? There are things that governments and large systemic things that need to be done to make a huge impact, but when I was talking to these scientists, they gave some pretty simple things that like you can do. You can, if you have the means, maybe buy an electric car, drive a hybrid car, compost, plant a tree, recycle, stuff like that. But like, we hear a lot and we kind of like drown it out because we hear it so much. But it is important stuff. And I think the message is the way that we generate electricity in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it's going to go a long way to how we feel when, our kids, the kids right now, they are in their 30s or 40s or 50s, they're adults. And it's, I don't know, I was listening, I think it was at NPR this morning, and I was listening, they said that there are like some good things to come from recent climate science. The United Nations just had a big report, and some like positive things to come out of that is that, one, climate science is more definitive now. Like it used to be that like we're pretty sure humans are causing climate change, stuff like that. Like they know definitively now, like it is carbon in the atmosphere that we are putting there that is changing the weather, it's changing the climate, and it's going to make things worse. We know that right now. And if we take huge discernible action right now in the next about 30 years, like we can stop the biggest effects that come in late century, that come in the 2080s to 2090s. We did the same thing with the ozone layer. Back in the 20th century, we realized that like hydrofluorocarbons, we got to stop putting those in the atmosphere, and we were able to make progress on the ozone layer, and you just don't hear about it anymore because it's a problem we fixed. Climate change is bigger than that, and it's harder to take a stab at carbon emissions, but it's all about action, and you could write a whole book on like,
I'm sure people have,
how action, how does action happen, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've been hearing climate change headlines all the time, and you feel like, that's Texas, that's California, that's Colorado, we're not getting wildfires here. Well, we are not immune in the Great Lakes. Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're not going to be as affected as places in the South and West, but at some point, we are not going to be immune. And there's even research that I write about in the article that shows that these sort of heat streaks where it's like it feels like it's the 80s, 90s just for like a week or so,
mm-hmm.
like those have doubled since 1970. And I feel like if you're from Columbus, like you grew up here in the 60s or the 70s. I've talked to people and they say like, yeah, it was cooler when I was growing up, and now it feels hotter. And climate is weather over time, and sure, it may not seem like Columbus is gonna feel like it's on fire tomorrow, but give it 50, 60, 70, 80 years, and we will feel like, as the scientists say in the article, we'll feel like the Deep South here.
All right, Ben, really interesting stuff you have going on. What's next for this project?
Heat is the biggest thing, and we're just looking at more story ideas. If you have story ideas, reach out to us. My email is linked to in the article.
Yes.
So we're going to look at, I think we're going to focus on heat. This sort of dangerous summer heat that we're going to end up seeing is not distributed equally. Like rural areas, we'll see less of it than urban areas, just because of the heat island effect, which mm-hmm. people may not be familiar with. Basically, the heat island effect is you have all this metal and concrete and asphalt in the city, and that reflects down and doesn't escape at night. So,
I'll give you an example that I always give people. You ever
Please.
been in the Horseshoe on like one of the first 2 or 3 games of the season, and you walk in and you're like, ooh, it is toasty in here? That's because the Horseshoe is made of concrete and the turf has black rubber pellets in it, and it is significantly warmer. It's probably 5 to 7 degrees warmer in there. Ask any football player what it's like to play on turf versus grass. So that's just kind of an anecdotal thing that I think many people have experienced, being inside of a stadium that is made of concrete that has turf and those black pellets inside. Yeah,
there's just so much to do with heat. One article that I added to the Climate Columbus category under our weather drop down is we call it the dog days of summer. That sort of I think we're just seeing the tail end. That's sort of like July, August. Though I found a study that those days are increasing. That the worst summer days are increasing.
2 years ago for Ohio State homecoming in mid-October, it was 90 degrees. I very distinctly remember that.
Yeah, so and that's another point. Summer gets a lot worse, but then we lose some comfort in spring. We lose some comfort in fall. The hot summer temperatures spread out. Earlier in the year, later in the year, and speaking of later in the year, meteorologist Ben Gelber. He wrote an article for us this morning.
It's trending right now.
Yeah, at the La Nina pattern coming from the west is predicted for later this year, and
it's our #1 story on our website right now. I'm going to drop it in the comments if you guys are watching on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's going to have big effects, and you can read about it in the article. It'll have big effects on the drought in the west and on our snowfall and rainfall that we get here in Ohio later in the winter. And climate change adds instability to those weather patterns, and can worsen their extreme effects. So I encourage you to look at that, and we'll be publishing more climate change stories in the days, weeks, months, etc. to come.
All right, Ben, thank you so much. Yeah. We really appreciate it. I know you are working really hard on this project, trying to track down the right people. You can take the numbers, but you got to make sure you take the numbers, put them in good context, talk to the right people, and ask them what they mean. So you really did that here, and we appreciate it. If you guys are interested in learning more, make sure you go to NBC4i.com, go to the weather tab, and then we have a drop down called Climate Columbus. If you are watching on Facebook right now, we have all of those stories linked in the description of this video, and if you are watching on NBC4i.com, you can scroll down to read more. We'll talk to you later. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.